Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, thank you for this fellowship, thank you for this great time with friends. Please bless us and let us have a good day. Please give us the strength and the competency as we have fun and enjoy our hobbies that you allow us to do. Please protect us and let's have a great day. In Christ's holy name, amen.
Amen.
Alright. Hello, welcome to the Sword Podcast. We've not really come up with a name for this yet. I think that's a later issue. I'm here with a couple buddies right here, and I think we're just gonna kind of introduce ourselves, what's our background, and why someone should listen to us.
My name is Dennis Kuntz. I've been fencing since I was about 8 years old. I'm now 22. I'll be 23 in November. About hitting I think this year would mark 15 years of me fencing total, I think, if I did my math right, or maybe 14 years, one of the two. I've done not just fencing and HEMA, I've done a variety of martial arts from boxing, wrestling, things like that. I'm very well experienced in knife fighting and dagger fighting. I live, breathe, eat martial arts, video games, swords, things like that. It's just my interest and hobby. I am a coach, fencing instructor. I taught at my own school for 4 years at the Norwood Society of Historical Swordsmanship, which I had to leave because I graduated college not too long ago, so I'm no longer teaching there. And I'm currently looking around for places either to teach at or to start my own school at.
Yes, so my name's Joel. I help run the St. Louis Historical European Martial Arts Association. I am a newly made longsword coach for German longsword. I've been doing HEMA since 2021. And before I was doing HEMA, I was doing MMA, kickboxing, and karate. So I have a martial arts background. I've been doing martial arts since before I was 10 years old. But I got into HEMA in 2021, and I run a YouTube channel called Fighters Guild, which is about swords and sword fencing and the historical sources. And I believe that is it for me, as far as who I am.
I It's always kind of weird for me like talking about stuff like this of like I have like the complete opposite of all this. I have almost zero martial arts background besides like taekwondo when I was 7. I have more of a survivalist background. Well, that's doing a lot of Boy Scouts, trail life, a lot of being survivalist, which kind of applies pretty well into the whole medieval aspect thing, which I think that would be an interesting way to add for my part of the discussion. I uh I started HEMA about 3 years ago. I think it was 2022 is when I first started, January, and I primarily study and teach English longsword here in Missouri, either in Columbia or in Jefferson City. Recently started an own chapter of my club in Columbia, and I also run a YouTube channel called The Fantasy Survival Guide, basically just taking concepts and ideas and how an actual fantasy adventure would want to survive. Now, Dennis, I believe you also run a few channels that if you want to plug.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own TikTok channel, the Goldencrownswordsman. That is where I share a bunch of my like HEMA journey, my martial arts journey, and things like that, along with like just some random things going on in my life that I feel like break up the monotony. Like the last two posts were about me signing up for Donnybrook, which happens in Kansas City
I'm
in
excited for that.
August. Yeah,
I believe all three of us are going right there, and I think there might be a
Yes.
discussion for a different podcast of a concept of creating a team for it. But I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
yeah.
So
You go ahead, Joel.
yeah. So since we're first starting out and we're all three of us are coaches and have experience HEMA coaching, I think it would be nice for us to kind of bounce some ideas off each other and try to talk about like what does that really mean to be a HEMA coach or a HEMA instructor? Like what are the keys to the trade? You could say. And I just wanted to just sort of walk through like a scenario and see if we can get all three of our takes on it. Because today in our club we had somebody new come by, and like didn't like had fencing experience in like middle school, but otherwise didn't really have any HEMA experience. And I think um, like it's interesting to see how coaches take somebody who is fresh. So if we were to kind of think about that, like if someone came to you and wanted to learn HEMA and they had nothing, how would we get them started, and what are good ways to train greenhorns, so to say?
I think we all have a lot of experience with that, especially like with me just starting the chapter up like just last year. It's a really interesting topic to start off with. Um, I
So let's
think
start with equipment. So if somebody had nothing and they were like, "What do I need to do this?" What would you guys say? We'll start with Alex.
I don't think we should start with equipment, mostly because, and this is my opinion, the first equipment I would give someone is either a just a nice quarterstaff, just like a dowel rod you get from like Menards, or a foam sword that I've got plenty of. And because I think when I'm training, when I'm getting someone started, is I give them like the least amount of tools to start with, to sort of build them up. That's my opinion. So we sort of start small, and then sort of work on like technique, or at least like the concept of techniques.
Right. So you're saying instead of like going out and getting a mask, getting a jacket, getting a full kit from whatever HEMA website, you're saying just start with like just a stick
Honestly, just a
and
stick.
yeah, just
I've had
something.
so many people like come in, join us for like a little while. Whether it's my chapter or the main club of people like join. They do it for like 2 months. They buy the gear and they just never see them again. Of like, we want to make sure you enjoy the hobby before putting such a high price on it.
What about you, Dennis?
So I guess this is maybe my experience when it comes to teaching and uh, those types of activities is probably abnormal compared to the rest of HEMA because I taught at a military college, right? So I already have like different levels of presumptions that are being made onto what my students can do and um, what's required of them and how things work financially. Right now, none of our club did not get any financial support from the government or from the school. I like to put that out there. Everything that we did was self funded by us, or in a lot of cases, self funded by me.
You had the merch store, which I'm kind of sad I never actually got to grab.
Yeah, we did have a merch store, but I like to think of it like this. When I'm training my students, I am putting my own reputation on the line with each student that I train or that I teach. So whether or not they're completely new or have some experience in martial arts or whatnot, I in some way do make a level of financial investment into them. So typically the first thing I do whenever I start off with a guy, whether he's experienced or not, is I go ahead and just purchase them a synthetic longsword, synthetic saber, something that's relatively inexpensive from like Purple Heart, and I give them our discount code or my discount code, which is
Do
like
you have a
20%.
specific? Do you have like a specific synthetic that you think is best for beginners?
Well, my I'll let you know my opinion on this has kind of changed on and off for and against synthetic swords.
That's
Mainly because there are a lot of
that's an entire discussion on its own. Synthetic swords.
yeah. Um, Typically, I'll suggest right if they are genuinely wanting to get into it, and we don't want to create that big of a financial commitment. The Night Shop synthetic longswords off of Purple Heart are they are a good starter to go in order to teach.
Is
Right?
that the
It's
one that they sell in a 10 pack?
yeah, that's the one they sell on a 10.
Yeah, so I believe those are also branded as the Red Dragon Longsword, like on Amazon.
I don't know. I don't know. I
Well,
only
I
buy
like
them on a Purple
if we're
Heart.
talking about the same sword, and I think we are. I like that sword a lot too. That tends to be
Yeah,
my like first recommendation also.
Yeah, and that's if I want to start them off with synthetics. Typically people who don't actively train themselves in any physical manner, this is where I tend to get them first. Because I do believe in a process of a reward or award where we'll be training with the synthetics for like a month or two or a couple months till I buy them a steel. In that time, though, I'm urging them to purchase their own protective equipment because one, I don't want to get anything wrong about sizes because then I have to send it back and I have to pay a boatload of money to get a jacket and a pair of gloves and a mask for them. I have no problem making a financial commitment to get them a sword though, to start off with the actual hands-on training and things like that. But
What year would you
everything about me is
like where do
what
you,
was that?
if you were to like tier as far as like what is most important to purchase starting out opposed to what is not? How do you usually like direct your students?
Depends if my student is a it depends on whether or not my student's masculine or feminine. Because the first thing I always stress that gets purchased is a cup and a plastron. Right.
That's interesting. That is like, go ahead.
That is because I
I
want to
feel like the
prevent.
cup is a piece of equipment a lot of HEMA users like forget about very
They
easily.
do.
Oh
I know a lot
yeah.
of people that don't wear
And
them.
to be honest, it's where like a cup is probably the most important compared to other combative sports.
Oh yeah. I mean, we had just to take it like this. We had a tournament that I went to like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where a dude like no offensive action was taken, but his sword like fell at such an angle because it I guess it was just like from that those thrusts that whenever that someone just runs into your sword and then you have to let go just because it's about to spring wildly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happened. The sword fell with the pommel going down, the point sticking up, and the dude continued to walk forward for whatever reason, and the point slipped in and hit him in the gonads.
Oh my god.
And
Oh.
it was like seeing a brick wall fall. Because I mean, this dude looked like he was 240 pounds of raw man meat right here, and he just collapsed on the ground holding his crotch. And I'm sitting here like, "Where's your freaking cup, my guy?" And he
Doing
wasn't wearing one.
I was watching a video on it was like some HEMA Facebook group or whatever of like someone did a rake rising up into the crotch area, and it was a
Oh yeah.
without restraint, full force rake right into it.
Yeah. So when it comes to protective equipment, I will not spar or I will not start doing any sort of like high intensity sparring and to a level medium intensity sparring if I know the guy's not wearing a cup or if the girl I'm fencing isn't wearing a plastron.
Yeah,
I know a lot
that's
of
a
people.
responsible thing to do.
That is one. It's for my own liability. I have all my students sign a liability form or affirm to the if it was back at Norwich, affirm to the safety standards of the club so that I'm not medically responsible for what
Yeah.
happens during training.
Yeah, when I teach privately, I have one drafted up. I think that's really important to just have that, and I think it's good for communication too, just to let you know, like, hey, this is still a martial art. This is still something that requires a lot of control and a lot of discipline, and mistakes can happen like very easily if you aren't careful.
Yeah,
Not the
but out of all that, the first thing I typically recommend are those two items and then a mask.
I that is really interesting. I definitely think those two things are important. However, I don't think I would recommend as the first ones, mostly because like those are quite useless if you don't have a gambeson.
Well, here's my counterpoint to that, Griff. All right,
I'm listening.
the cup is a multifaceted item that they can take with them everywhere else. The gambeson is not.
That's fair.
and it's a far cheaper purchase than just buying a gambeson. Like, I'm gonna be honest, if you're doing some low level intensity sparring, right, whether or not you need a gambeson is not like the clearest cut line, especially if it's low intensity. Um, they don't necessarily need a gambeson that fast.
If I could say what I would say for the getting new person, that's what I have been recommending for the past like year of starting the chapter. Of like, I always recommend a helmet and gloves first, because
Yeah,
I've never sparred anyone, even low intensity. I never sparred anyone with even a steel or synthetic without armor. And so we have the mask and the mask and the gloves to do drills, to do like active work, and that's kind of been the staple for my club. Was you get the gloves to protect your hand, whether that's a gauntlet or some sort of hard plastic, or in the helmet to prevent face shots. Because I feel like protecting the head is probably the most important thing. If there was one thing I recommend, it'd be a mask. Everything else would be okay. Additionally, I also don't spar with anyone until they have the full get up, which is the gambeson helmet mask and even leg protection.
man, I guess I'm an exception whenever you just decide to fucking wail at me with the freaking foam sword you had.
The only exception with that is the foam swords.
I was actually going to bring those up.
I think foam swords are the perfect way to get someone started in HEMA, right? Because it gets them out of that. There's that fear of hitting someone that every new person always has. They have like such like an aversion to hitting someone. Get like urging them to like, it's okay, you can hit me. Using the foam swords, I think is like the perfect way to do it.
I'm gonna be honest. I completely like forgot about the padded weapons that Purple Heart Armory has.
They're
Those are
amazing.
so cool. They're it is a really cool innovation. I like to call them boofers because they go boof when they hit you. But I'm actually interested in purchasing more. I know they have a padded rapier, and
They have sabers, rapiers. I think there's a basket hilt. They have a Rondo
yeah,
dagger. They have of course the long swords, and I think they have an
yeah.
almond sword.
I've been wanting to try the rapier just to see what the weight on it's like. But
I
I think those are also cool items to start off with. I don't know. I still prefer the other swords. Just mainly I can buy 10 just outright in a pack and give them to multiple people.
I think the main issue with getting a person started in HEMA is the cost, right? Getting a
Oh yeah,
HEMA is expensive. I mean, my spez heavies cost like $250, $300. The helmet was like 180. Not even including the gambeson. It gets expensive really fast, and like even if there's someone who's like, I kind of want to do this, but I don't know sure if it's long term, getting them started with a foam sword is like the perfect way to do it. You get a taste of what it could be.
So when it comes to picking out equipment for an absolute beginner, I kind of pivot in a slightly different direction, um, where like I think beginner HEMA is more of an investment in your time than an investment necessarily like out of your money to buy equipment. So like I take a beginner, I have a set of two of those like Knight Bishop swords, and I don't really start beginners out in sparring until they have had at least a few weeks of training. I will just drill because I'm very prudent on trying to get the fighter to build up their instincts before they even begin sparring. So we do a lot more flow drills, or we'll drill certain plays until I can kind of feel like they have the instincts to do what they've been taught in sparring. And then, you we have I have foam swords like Boffers. I'll use those with, you know, hockey gloves and mask. That's really what you need if you're using a foam sword. I want to get a pair of the fake steel long swords because like they're foam, but they're also they have the same like historical profile, which is like my problem with the boffers is that like at least for the long swords,
Too thick.
they're not. Yeah, the profile isn't exactly accurate. Um, so
Well,
yeah,
as a person
starting
who's
out,
been
I
into
would
the
just say like if you want to study on your own also, you just need like a synthetic of whatever sword you want to do and then some kind of manuscript, and
yeah.
that's like the bare minimum for HEMA. And if you want to learn alongside a coach or an instructor, you just need the sword, to be honest, to get
Yeah.
started.
I mean, the thing is that for me, like when I'm like trying to get my people to start, right, or get someone from starting when I'm teaching them, the biggest thing for me is making sure that I am available to them when they need me, right? Obviously, because of my primary profession, I'm not always available, which makes it difficult, right? But and this is, we were talking about this earlier before this started, right? The issue with HEMA is that no one shows up on time for things, or things just don't start
Yeah.
on time. And for beginners or people wanting to get into it, that is a very big issue, right?
Yeah,
Um,
people just falling in and out of it.
yeah, because right, let's put it like this: if your instructor, and there are a lot of people who are very patient with it. Thank goodness we got students who are very patient with us, right? But our students are giving us their time and in some cases their money to train them, right?
Yes.
Um, that is it is our obligation at that point not only to make sure they get their money's worth, but also to honor the agreement that we are going to be there on time, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Um, in other words, like by not doing that, we're ideally an instructor is disrespecting them, right? It's not like we're back in the 1600s where it's like there's not really a clock, so people can guess what the time is or whatnot, or you know, the more emphasis was placed on this is when the instructor's going to be here. We have to be here when the instructor's here, right? No,
Right.
the board has switched because like in American culture, the priority is on the consumer and not the producer.
I
Right.
think one of the most important things, and especially like with this podcast and with everything, is like even in even in most media, when you're trying to all provide a service to someone, you don't want to waste the person's time, right? You want to make it worth it to them. And
Oh
when
yeah,
I first started doing the Columbia chapter, I messed up really bad with that. Of I was trying to do so much stuff, I ended up giving the people nothing. And that was one of the biggest learning lessons for me was the fact that like, I wasn't finding a worth to the people that were coming. I think that's very important as either an instructor or as anyone who's trying to help someone get into the hobby is to not waste their time.
oh
Yeah,
absolutely.
because when you're a coach, like when you're an instructor, you are the blueprint, like HEMA fighter for that person. So you are setting the example and setting the standards for that individual person. So, like, you do need to embody that spirit of, like, you know, holding the art, like, at that respect, where, it's not just something that you do to, like, burn time with. It is a commitment for both you and the person you're training. Um, but yeah, I do think that that can be an issue of people not like they're trying it out, but they're not really sure if they want to go all the way through with it. And I think that's a difficult time for anyone learning HEMA because it does starting out you do spend most of your time just reviewing the basics over and over and over again. You don't really get to like the cool things until you've like put some time in.
Yeah,
So like as someone starting out, that can feel a bit frustrating.
It does.
because you want to do the cool HEMA things you see online, but now I'm just sitting here with this guy just doing the same cut over and over again, and I don't know why.
Well, uh, that goes into one thing, right? I use the military training process when it comes to teaching, right? Which means we always start with like three core ideas, right? So you have your task, your purpose, and your condition, which is essentially what is the task you're doing in this training, right? Um, that task can be, okay, we're gonna be practicing fendentes or Oberhaus. We're gonna be training entry into closest striking distance and how to protect yourself in that way, etc., etc., etc. Right? That's what you're doing. Then the purpose is the why are you doing it. So the reason why we're training these things is because when we actually get into sparring or whenever you go into that tournament or that competition or whatever you're doing, maybe you may also be like doing a screenplay or whatnot, so that you understand how to properly defend yourself while conducting that offensive action. That way, you don't constantly double or get hit the entire time you're in that match. And then lastly is condition. That is, what is this going to do to you, right? So how does this set your quote unquote victory condition or the results of it, right? Or the results of this training. And that's what we want, right? I feel like explaining that in that manner to your students why are you teaching them to do 3,000 fendentes before we get onto a sotani, or 3,000 descending cuts before we move to the ascending cut, right? That's a really ridiculous and like over the top example, because you can teach both fendentes and sotanis at the same time, but it gives them the confidence to know, like, oh, this is why we're doing that. So I'm gonna put up with the suck so that we can get to the fun stuff later.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Just
Because
laying that out, because sometimes it can feel like that. Like if you go to certain clubs, they're just like, "All right, we're just gonna do this," and then they don't really tell you why.
yeah,
Um, I've got another interesting thing to just to hear your opinions on it. So some teachers don't. I don't know if this is like a hard rule or a soft rule, but they don't necessarily approve of the student looking further into the material than what they've been shown by said instructor. I think Blood and Iron does that, right? Where you can't necessarily like look into advanced techniques if you haven't been taught it, right?
I I'm not going to make an assumption off of that. I believe that's something with Arma. I don't
Okay.
think that's something with Blood and Iron.
Yeah, it's one of those hardcore groups where it's like you get all your knowledge from your instructor, and if they find out that you're like looking at things or you try to do things you haven't been taught, then you're gonna get like a stern talking to. Basically, I just want to know what your opinions on that is. Like,
If I could,
is it laissez faire for your guys? For
So
you guys, or do you try to kind of like control the material?
so that for me for me specifically, and sorry, Griff, I'm gonna hijack this one because I have like some level of personal investment in it.
understand.
I believe in the free proliferation of education and information. So I believe that even when I'm teaching something, my students at any point, at any time, can go into the source material to find things, to improve themselves. Because what that shows is that they, as the fighter, are taking the first necessary step in becoming a good to great fighter, which is self education. Finding out what actually works and what doesn't. And that's the whole process of learning to be a martial artist and to be a fighter. Yeah, you can go to a school, but if you don't self train, self correct issues, or figure out new things on your own and completely rely on your instructors who are intensely fallible people, you are going to fail as a fighter. You need to self study. You need to push the boundaries of your education, right? Without doing that, these you only hurt yourself essentially by not doing that. And I would say any instructor who restrains their students from looking into the freely available source material from Wittenhauer or from books that they buy are doing their students not just an injustice, but they are preventing them from becoming the greatest fighter that they could be. Because at a certain point, once we as instructors teach people to a certain point, we don't just become their instructor, we become their sparring buddy. And it's in that point when we reach that threshold that if they're not self-studying, if they're not using the resources that are available to them in order to study, then we as instructors can't improve. So it's necessary for both parties to have that level of self-study. It's absolutely necessary.
I honestly, I completely agree. With my HEMA journey I've not been quiet about my opinion, but one of the issues with my club, and I call it a club because it's not a school. It is very much a club of people who get together and fight. There was no meat to our instruction, right? That's for a huge variety of reasons. But we were going through this. We were going through whatever we were going through, longsword, blacksword, whatever, and like I just wasn't improving, and so I was forced to go into the manuals myself, to go through the treaties, and start doing my own self-research. And I think that was a really good decision because I don't think I would have improved as much if I didn't. And now on my own, as I'm trying to instruct people, trying to get people to get into the hobby themselves, the thing I always do is like, please go read on your own. I won't be able to teach you all, either because A, I'm not that good of a coach or a teacher. I'm relatively new at HEMA myself, but also like you are going to interpret this and going to read this in such a different way than me that it's not going to be wrong, but it's going to work. It's going to work for you, and I'm willing to help out. We're like, this is what they probably mean. This is what this is what the treaty says. I'm willing to help you with this, but it's up to you to improve yourself. And this kind of also goes in the fitness aspect of like we can't force people to do workouts, try to make their body fit. That is up to them in their own time.
That's
Additionally,
kind of
that
that last part's kind of funny because
we're
I
gonna
was absolutely able to work people out.
okay, you're different because you're military.
Yeah. That was the exception with us is that we were allowed to do physical training if we wanted to. Like every time there was doubles, we had a firm rule in our school where if someone doubled, and sometimes it was done with afterblows, they would have to start doing push-ups, and it compounded each time. So like the first time it would be 5, then 10, then 15, 20, 25, 30. There was one day where we got up to like 210 push-ups or something ridiculous like that.
That is a very important discussion, but I think we should table that just for because I
Never,
think that's a great another podcast idea.
never actually hit that point ever again. That was the
Um,
most we've ever done.
going
Yeah,
back to the
I
whole
agree with you. I agree with you too. Also, I agree that um, like my perspective on it is, you need to make HEMA your own. Like you need to make the art style your own. You need to do your own thing. I don't necessarily see like I don't see myself as like the main source of Rofer information, like because that's always going to come from the person doing it. I'm just there to help and guide along and give new perspectives on things. Uh, I do think that if you are interested in HEMA, you should be trying, at least trying to learn from a manuscript. I don't think they're 100% necessary. Like, if that's not something you want to do, but I think anyone who wants to take HEMA to the next level within themselves, then they'll have to start going into the manuals and trying things
and
for
there's no
themselves. And HEMA is supposed to be fun too. So if you want to try things you don't fully understand, then go ahead and try it because that's part of the fun. I don't necessarily think we should be gatekeeping things
there's
from
honestly no lack of resources for it as well.
yeah,
Things like
or
Wicked
yeah,
Tower, which is an amazing website. There's so much YouTube and video content like that, and
yeah.
there
And then
is
on the other hand, like, if I'm with somebody and I'm training them and I see them doing something and I may think they don't fully understand it, then I would address it. I say, hey, I see you doing this thing. Let me. I don't think you quite necessarily understand that technique or get the backbone knowledge of it. So I'm going to help you get that so that you can make that technique work for you. Um, I do think there's a structured way to teach. It's just I don't. I think people should just be allowed to have fun with their hobby. I
agreed.
don't. Yeah, I don't think we should be holding back knowledge from people,
My
and for the
entire
sake of
thing
like a false perception of like purity or something is like the main reason people do that.
My entire thing, when I first started this chapter, and I've been honest about it from the beginning, is I am just here to facilitate your entrance and continuation into HEMA. I'm never gonna be a good teacher. I'm never gonna be anything like that. I'm relatively new myself, but I'm just here to help you get through it. And I am fallible. I'm gonna mess up, and I have messed up quite a few times. But I'm here just to help you get into it. Whether it is helping you buy your gear, helping you see like, oh, there's this one technique or concept that I can help you with. Like, here's how I understand it. If you understand it differently, I'm not gonna stop you. But then also like having fun is the entire point of it, right? Of the first thing I always ask someone when they start HEMA is, why are you doing this? Are you being for a tournament? Are you trying to be like the sport aspect? Are you trying to find a martial art so you can defend yourself, or at least just like understand it? Are you trying to be a historian or a book writer? If you find that,
Yeah.
you can optimize that aspect, and you can just like work it to how you enjoy it. Some people just love fighting with foam swords, whether that's to amp guard or like any sort of like law up or any sort of foam stuff like that, or even just like people in my club just fight with foam swords because it's easy to get into, it's fun, and it's a blast. No one should
Yeah.
regulate how you enjoy swords.
Indeed, indeed. So I have one more talking point before I'll have to depart, but this is a really interesting one, and I just want to see where our heads are at with this. But just kind of like explain to me what you think the future of HEMA or historical fencing is. Like, what place do you think historical fencing will have in the wider world in the future?
That's an interesting one. That's been a little bit of discussion I've had recently in various Facebook groups and forums of the HEMA we have like now, especially like with the tournaments of being optimized for such a that. There's a lot of a push to being this sort of like sport with it. Not saying it's going to turn into like Olympic fencing or anything like that, but there is this sort of like gamified rule systems or this like sort of aspect of like trying to be as optimized as possible. And I feel like it does kind of miss out. There's a lot of fencers I know that have not even picked up a treatise, not even read any of them, and they just sort of do what like essentially the sport aspect. There's nothing wrong with that. If you enjoy that, that's fine. But I do feel like a lot of the historical aspect can be missing. A lot of people don't go and look at the sources, not even just to like appreciate them, but just to like enjoy them.
So you think people, as time goes on, less and less HEMA fencers will be interacting with manuscripts, and they'll just be doing what they're taught by their coach?
I feel that either by the coach or by modern like either modern YouTube videos or like modern like books and stuff like. I think there was what the Fabian Feck book, Vexual, which I'm sure is a great book. A lot of people recommend it, but
Yeah, like currently we're now in the age where like HEMA has like started to bear fruit, and now we just have living, breathing sword fighters that can make modern literature to explain like their ideas behind fencing.
and I don't think that's a wrong thing. I don't think it is at all. However, I think it's like it becomes that sort of aspect of where people start moving more into the modern aspect, while leaving the historical aspect behind. One of the reasons I'm so focused on the English tradition is I'm trying to recreate that historical aspect, trying to do more research and get more resources into it. I never force any of the people I fight with or teach with to stick with the English system. A lot of them read Italian stuff, read the German literature. That's fine with them. But for me, I'm trying to focus on it to try to recreate it. And that's not for everybody. Sometimes people just want to have fun with swords, and I'm not going to stop them. What do you think, Dennis? Because you have an interesting aspect, especially with your background in, traditional fencing, as well as historical martial arts.
Well, the thing is, right? I see HEMA growing into a some form of recognized sport similar to how, and it's already kind of like this, similar to how the multiple fighting championships are, like the UFC, AFC, um, and things like that. I think HEMA is going to grow a lot like that, where eventually we're going to go into a threshold where, yeah, we have modern swordsmen who are teaching a lot of good things, and we have some modern rape, like Robert Childs. Oh my God, this reminds me of Robert Childs, right? Robert Childs is, in my opinion, in no way a historical fencer. He's not. He teaches a lot from his own experiences with rapier, and from his quasi historical and modern developed rapier form that he developed when he wrote his book, right? I think we're gonna see more of that. I genuinely do. I think we are going to get past this concept of this is the Italian school of fencing, this is the imperial school of fencing, this is English fencing, and
That's kind
eventually
of
it's just going to grow past.
that's kind of what I was getting at.
Like, we're still going to have tons of the historical study, don't get me wrong, right? The historical study is still going to be there. We're still going to have manuscripts because people are going to want to look at the original source material to see why these ideas work, why these ideas don't work. Um, but that's kind of the route we're heading, and we can already see it through through its recognition as a sport, right? Like, there are several countries and several organizations in the United States that have decided to recognize HEMA officially as a sport. It may have had to have been presented to these organizations, but that's just how things come out.
And I think you're right. It is about that sort of modern aspect of people making their own systems, and I think there's again nothing wrong with it. But I think Bob Childs is a good example. But even through so much discourse I've seen online of people talking so much about either their lineage or their instructors of saying basically putting their experience or their what's what I'm looking for here, their instruction in fencing based off of either a school or a instructor or a teacher, saying I trained with so and so, and that's my call to being a good fencer.
Let's see. So here's my perspective on where I think HEMA's going to land in the future. I am not completely certain that HEMA will just like evolve into some like mass media sport like UFC or anything like that. I think that's still like a long ways away. But I think in the short term, I think we'll start to see colleges start to pick it up. I think universities will start having HEMA clubs, and they may even have their own divisions and like competitions between different universities. I think HEMA would be a perfect extracurricular for universities and colleges, and I know a lot of like college aged people are interested in HEMA more than ever. So I think we'll start seeing HEMA in more colleges. I mean, we already do, but I think I think that's where it'll begin growing.
I kind of agree with that. I live in a college town, and there's been so many people telling me that I should do demonstrations out of college or do like small stuff like that. And I think it would be interesting if I had more of an instruction, if I had more of a like a confidence in myself that I could do such a large thing. I think it'd be even if I think it'd be a great thing for that to grow like that, to actually get that attention. Because all things considered, if even if it does get that big, you also get more support. You can get more support for like a lot of the industry. You get better and cheaper things just because like there's more of a market for it. It'd be a it'd be a good thing for HEMA to get big.
So here's the thing: like, I'm not when I say like get recognized as a sport or grow in the similar way like the UFC or AFC or things like that. I'm not talking about it becoming mass a mass media sport. I'm saying that's the general direction we're heading to where we're gonna have a system or structure that's gonna look similar to that, right?
Yeah,
And
I do think at some point there will be like a wider like like fighting federation that HEMA fighters will recognize at some
well,
point.
I would say we're kind of already there. Are you familiar with like the Southern Historical Fencing League?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that the Southern Historical Fencing League, I think, has schools that span Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Georgia, uh, basically around the South, and there are all these schools that have like a similar competition scene, right?
Nice.
Yeah, so it has like Simborgi in Oklahoma is a part of it. The Austin Historical Weapons Guild, the school I started learning from in Midland, Texas, Davin Rich European Martial Arts, Shreveport HEMA in Louisiana, Texas Armazari in Houston, Verblossom Historical Fencing in Dallas, uh, then Lake Charles in Louisiana. Like all those schools are in the same like league, if that makes sense. And I think with HEMA ratings, which for those that don't know, HEMA ratings is this like international organization that rates competitive HEMA fighters through their scores and their like overall fighting performance. Um, I think we've already reached that threshold where we do have some sort of like Colgate competition because in the Northeast, when I started the Norwich Society of Historical Fencing, uh, the University of Vermont started their HEMA club, and so did a school in Boston, and so did a school in Maine, somewhere in Maine, and they all came to us when it came time to fence. So we already had our own little inner Colgate competition going on.
Yeah, and I think like even in Missouri, I think like Eastern and Western Missouri are kind of like there's a lot of crosstalk within those two bubbles.
I would
Like
say
I know
yeah.
our club hangs out with Alex's club all the time, and then there's another club in St. Charles that you know both members from both will go to.
I think for the most part, if we're discussing things like that, the clubs have kind of been like that. Of like there's like not a rivalry, but like a sense of like honestly just friendly competition from the different clubs and the different like schools, whether it is from Baylor School or whether from St. Louis HEMA or whether from like Union Historical Fencing. It's That's an interesting way to put it, I suppose.
Yeah, it's kind of I'll put it like this: like coming in as the outsider, right? Y'all's relationship with HEMA is a bit different than what I saw in the Northeast, and that's maybe because like when I started out in the Northeast, there was like almost no competition there. There were no tournaments. I think I was like the first tournament in like 2 years when we did King of the Green Mountain, and to me that was crazy.
And now in Missouri, we have like 2 or 3 a year.
Oh yeah, can't wait for Johnny.
Yeah, there's like a HEMA event like every like month or so in the mid like out here. There's like something always to like look forward to at least.
Which reminds me, are there any upcoming events within the next month?
Uh, I think I think next I think there's Green Chapel that's coming up in Oklahoma.
Green Chapel.
Yeah. This has been a good discussion, and it's kind of like a good pilot episode, trying to figure out how everything works out. I definitely think that this would be a good thing to keep on doing. You know, talking with y'all and see about more concept, more thoughts, because we all come from very different backgrounds. And we may not agree or disagree on everything. But yeah, I'm hoping to see
Yeah,
y'all.
and there's so many more different talking points. Like there's so much more stuff I want to get into. Um, just like thinking about what would be good talking points. So I would love to make more episodes. Yeah.
Yeah. Unless there's anything else to say, thank y'all for watching, and praying y'all good adventure. Bye.